how a process works if someone's already interested. So we have the scenario that happens from time to time where we're talking to a company that says, hey, you know what, we are interested in exiting, we are interested in seeking capital. However, we're already talking to somebody. We already have somebody who's interested, and we're seeing how that dialogue is going to play out. And that's a good thing, right? It's usually something from the outside that takes place that brings someone to contemplate a potential strategic transaction. I think oftentimes, as with any of our businesses, ours included, it's heads down, work, and then outside events happen from time to time that make us take a step back and say, hey, what is the broader strategic path forward? What are some of the objectives that we'd like to accomplish? And so it's great in terms of kind of a catalyzing factor towards that conversation and towards that kind of internal analysis that these things happen. But we have the perspective from our experience, and this was both obviously in our iteration as Hillview Partners over these last 7 years, but from my career as well before that in investment banking, private equity, and corporate development, is to say, if that's the case, wonderful, but how do you more fully fill out that process, or how do you run a process kind of in parallel to those preliminary discussions to make sure that the outcome is the best? And the reason we emphasize this is in the private markets in particular, and in particular within the private markets, within the middle market and lower middle market ends of that spectrum, it's a fragmented field, right? And so the dispersion of data points, if you will, is going to be very different than, say, selling a house, than, say, selling stocks, right? Where the bid ask, if you will, is pretty narrow, where the market is pretty well defined, where there's a ton of comps, where you can see what the price is of something at almost any given time or get a very good sense of that. Private market for companies or in capital is largely far more dispersed. And so you could see different data points, different offers for the same exact situation that could be 2 to 3 times as much, right? And that's only looking at kind of the headline terms. When you dig into the other considerations of it that we'll get into, that dispersion can be even broader. And so it's always our perspective that you want to run processes in parallel, not sequentially, right? So oftentimes you get reached out to by a company, they would like to acquire you, the conversation progresses, and then for some reason it stops, and then you have to start that process all over again with maybe someone else who had reached out, or maybe someone else that you were interested in speaking with. Whereas we find it to be much more effective, far less distracting as well, and obviously dovetailing into being a very discrete process as well, as doing these things in parallel, having these conversations in tandem with multiple people, gathering the data in real time, synthesizing it, and moving forward in an educated, kind of data-driven way throughout the process in what's otherwise a pretty fragmented and inefficient space. So one of the main considerations being, first and primarily, is this the best offer, right? And until you have other offers available for the situation, right, it's really difficult to tell that. And so obviously we can look at comps for any particular scenario. However, by generally saying, okay, a company with this EBITDA in this particular industry at this life cycle of its business may trade at 5 to 6 times EBITDA, that doesn't mean that there's not bids out there that could be 7, 8 times for a particular situation, but you really have to turn over the rocks to do that and have these conversations. There's not just a marketplace that these things can be thrown into to kind of get a bid. You really have to get out there, talk to a lot of people, and see what the appetite is for the particular situation. And another consideration is not just purely the dollar amount, but what are the other variables of the business. And so we always like to say, as we said in an earlier video, that an acquisition encompasses, yes, the price or the terms, but also what is the structure of the deal? How much of it's at closing? How much is over time? What does the transition period look like for ownership? How long are they obligated to stay? And what are those roles and responsibilities, and what that stress on a post-transaction existence will look like? And then lastly, and then also, what about the stakeholders of the business, the other employees, the community, the personnel, the vendors? How does everything get taken care of in an intelligent way that shows appreciation for all of those people's contributions throughout the ownership of the business? And so by getting many data points for all of these different variables, you're really able to kind of spread things out and compare things on more of an apples to apples basis. And I'd say lastly, think about the process in itself. And so if you're speaking to one party, it's not to say that that party is going to intentionally drag its feet or move slow for any instance, but they're going to ask for a lot of information. What of this information is necessary to share before an offer? What is not necessary to share? What's kind of the normal conventions? What is the amount of information or the amount of disclosure that's really necessary to allow someone to give a proper value for a business? And it's a difficult thing to glean if you've never undertaken this process before. And so from our perspective, we know exactly what information needs to be shared. We know what information should not be shared. And we were able to kind of push the process forward. Again, that parallel process. So if you have one person who's interested, who's asking lots of questions, and who you just keep giving information to, what is the contingency? What is the deadline, right? We don't like to be cynical, but it is contingencies and deadlines that make people in business move forward, take the next step, and I think progress and sift that wheat from the chaff. We always say we want to get our yeses fast, we want to get our no's even faster, clear that out and really see what the process is going to look like. And so really in conclusion, from our perspective, is that even if there is an interested party or multiple interested parties, it always behooves a seller or someone seeking capital to bring in and flesh out a full process. It gets people to put forth their best offers. It gives you the clarity that everybody is being given the amount of information and not more than necessary to make their decisions. It allows you to know what the true dispersion of data points is, what the market really will offer for something before you select what that path is going forward. And again, on multiple variables, not just one variable. And then lastly, we take the position that it always generates the best offers as well. It could ultimately, look, there's some probability greater than zero that even after running the whole process, you're going to end up with that same party. But what we like to say is that in any of those situations where that's ever happened, the ultimate offer versus the initial offer is considerably better. And then even as pertaining, because it's a consideration and an honest one, right, that you have to say there's going to be a cost of hiring a party to represent us as an advisor throughout this process. But what we can honestly say, and we have plenty of data points and success stories to share, is that our involvement and the cost for our firm being involved with the process is usually dwarfed by the incremental value or the improvement of the offer, again, on not just the price, but on all variables across the board as you reach the ultimate closing of a transaction or the securing and funding of capital. And so something to think about. The ongoing or preliminary discussions of an opportunity with any particular party does not preclude and really should be an encouraging factor to run a broader process. And we're always happy to speak about that with any of our prospective clients, whether or not they decide to use our firm or elsewhere, just because we always want to see the best results for any company that's looking to exit or secure capital. In any event, that's a thought for today. Hope the week continues to go well for everyone. Keep pushing forward. God bless. We'll see everyone next time.